think the police certainly gave the appearance of two-tier policing, and that's very concerning. I worry that the police at times are too concerned about community relations than enforcing the law without fear or favor. I think there is two-tier politics, where some of our political leaders are so afraid to confront these issues that they are silent on them. I am not going to do that. But I think if you shout Allah Akbar in an intimidating manner, and of course, context is everything, clearly not if one is doing it, as millions of British Muslims and Muslims all over the world do in a peaceful manner every day, prayerful manner. But if you shout it in an intimidatory manner, then it's right that action is taken. And that is what the law says. The law gives the police the ability to take action. And whether it's that or scenes like we saw over the course of the last year, someone shouting jihad off Oxford Street and the police putting out a tweet saying that it was perfectly okay. Someone projecting a genocidal chant onto Big Ben and nothing really happening about it. People praising the Houthis on the streets of London when they were firing missiles at British-flagged vessels. That is wrong. I'm one of the handful of members of the House of Commons who speak about things like Islamist extremism. I think that's really important. You've got to choose your language carefully. You've got to try to persuade rather than needlessly provoke when you address these complex and sensitive issues. But you've got to address them. You've got to speak up for the silent majority in our country whose voices deserve to be heard. I don't support creating a definition of Islamophobia. I gave that a great deal of thought when I was community secretary and concluded that there was not a satisfactory way to do that maintained freedom of speech in our country. And I appreciate that others may take a different view, and the Labour Party say that they're going to create one, maybe even legislate for it. But that's not something that I would advocate. That does not mean, of course, that we must fight racism and Islamophobia wherever we come across it. And I will always do that. I think it's incredibly important we build a united and cohesive country where everyone can feel that they have a home. And there's a really important role for the leader of our country, particularly a prime minister, to have a unifying voice on these issues. And that was why I felt that Keir Starmer had so failed to meet the moment when we had those riots earlier in the year, that he was so quick to call out the thuggery and the violence from the far right, which was completely disgraceful, but so slow, so squeamish, so selective to call it out when there were sectarian gangs on the streets of some of our cities, including, on one occasion, here in Birmingham. Well, this is obviously a matter of conscience. Today, my thinking is this. I would vote against assisted dying. I've thought about it quite carefully. It is personal to me. My own grandmother lived with me. It was one of the most formative experiences of my childhood. She had a very long and terminal illness, a very severe form of emphysema. And the last years of her life were extremely difficult and painful. And it was painful for us to watch. Now, we never had a conversation, obviously, about what she might have done if we'd lived in a different society with different laws. But I understand where the motivation to change the law comes from. It's a noble one in that sense. But I am very concerned about the unintended consequences of changing the laws. Just before the general election, I went to Canada to meet the Canadian Conservative Party. But one of the things that, just in conversation, they spoke about was the very severe unintended consequences that they have experienced from their own changes in the law. And so I would just urge everyone, my parliamentary colleagues, Keir Starmer and the Labour Party, to think this through very, very carefully. Don't rush into this, because I don't want to be living in a country where there are elderly people. In fact, in Canada, there are quite young people who have been pushed into something which is unnecessary and is deeply regrettable.